Ang edukasyon ay hindi para sa iilan. Ito ay karapatang pantao, para sa lahat. Obligasyon ng Estado na protektahan, igalang at tiyakin ang karapatan sa edukasyon ng lahat ng mamamayan. Ang karapatan sa edukasyon ay kinikilala bilang isang karapatang pantao sa mga internasyonal na batas at kumbensyon. Maging sa saligang batas ng Pilipinas. Subalit hindi lahat ng bata ay natatamasa ang karapatan sa edukasyon. Sa buong mundo, mayroong 262 milyon o isa sa bawat 5 bata at kabataan sa pagitan ng edad na 6 at 17 ang wala sa paaralan. Sa Timog Silangang Asya, isa ang Pilipinas na may malaking bilang ng mga bata at kabataan na hindi nag-aaral o ang tinatawag na out-of-school children and youth. Aabot sa halos 10% ng mga Pilipino na may edad 6 hanggang 24 na taong gulang ay wala sa paaralan o isa sa 10. Kinakailangang hanapin kung sino ang mga batang ito at alamin ang mga dahilan kung bakit hindi sila nag-aaral. Isinusulong ng Civil Society Network for Education Reforms o ENET Philippines ang kampanyang Edukasyon para sa Lahat o Education for All o EFA mula nang itinatag ito taong 2000. Panahon ito ng pagsigla ng kilusan para sa EFA o Education for All movement sa buong mundo. Mula EFA, ipinagpatuloy ng ENET Philippines ang kampanyang ito sa mas pinalawak na kampanyang pagkakamit ng Sustainable Development Goals o SDG, lalo na ang SDG 4 na may layuning makamit ang pantay at kalidad na edukasyon para sa lahat at kumikilala sa patuloy at panghabang buhay na edukasyon o ang tinatawag na lifelong learning. Isinusulong ng ENET Philippines ang pagpapalawak at pagpapalakas ng partisipasyon ng mamamayan para sa mga reformang pang-edukasyon sa Pilipinas. Gayon din ang pagpapatupad at pagpapaunlad ng alternative learning systems na naglalayong maabot at maisama ang mga mamamayang mahihirap at naisasantabi. Kabilang sa advokasya ng ENET ang sumusunod. Edukasyong walang isinasantabi, may pagkakapantay-pantay at may kalidad para sa lahat, o access to inclusive, equitable, and quality education for all. Alternatibong sistema ng pagkatuto at edukasyong may kapakinabangan sa buong buhay, o alternative learning system and lifelong learning. Pagbibigay proteksyon sa mga bata at positibong pagdidisiplina, o child protection and positive discipline. Edukasyong hindi naghihiwalay sa mga may kapansanan o inclusive education for learners with disabilities. Karapatan at kagalingan ng mga kaguruan o teachers' rights and welfare. Sapat na budget sa edukasyon at wastong pamamahala sa edukasyon o education financing and governance. Edukasyong may pagtatangi sa pagkakapantay-pantay ng kasarian o gender equality and education. Para maisakatuparan ang mga advokasya ng ENET, isinasagawa nito ang sumusunod. Pakikipag-ugnayan at pakikipagtulungan sa iba't ibang sektor at education and development
magandang hapon po. It's Saturday again, 3 o'clock to 4:30 in the afternoon. Naririto naman po kami, Senior City Kwentuhan. Co-sponsored po ng Inet Philippines, kasi especially focus on adult learning ng senior sa panahon ng COVID, mga FB community po ng mga senior na gustong makalabas sa panahon ng COVID. And of course, Gary Granada's group na nagsimula nito, Lapis Siso Channel. So every Saturday po, 3 to 4:30, Senior City Kwentuhan. We had a short break po last 2 Saturdays. Tapos tamang-tama when we resume ngayon, episode 18. June 5. Kaya sabi ko sa aking co-host, introduce pala muna natin. Ako po si Ed Torre.
At si Girlie Villariba.
Introduce po na natin ang ating very special guest na kaya namin naisip dahil June 5, for those who don't know it, is World Environment Day. June is World Environment Month. Ngayon, pwede namang maraming issue pwedeng pag-usapan, global warming, climate change, at iba pa. Pero naisip namin, bakit hindi mag-focus talaga sa isang particular lugar at palalimin natin ang ating understanding of the environment with special, syempre, pagpapahalaga, sinong nandun? Hindi lang yan flora and fauna and mountains and rivers, mga tao. Yung mga nandun mismo, mga katutubo na sila ang guardians at stewards noon. We were so happy na nakilala ko way back at nung na-contact namin siya, willing siyang maging guest. Bagamat pinoproblema namin ang globe wifi at dinenervyos kami baka mag-power shortage sa Bukidnon. But in the meantime, dala-dalawa computer and cellphone, ang ating special guest po will be with us and even sent us a lot of slides na ginamit natin later. So let us introduce to you June 5 World Environment Day, our very special guest. Nakatawa ko minsan ang haba-haba po ang formal na pangalan niya. Maria Easterluna Santos Canoy. Pero known to her friends as Chai Canoy. So please introduce yourself at ipapalas ko yung ating opening slide. Chai, will you please greet our listeners and tell a little bit about yourself, your opening message sa kanila. Chai?
Okay. Greetings to everyone listening to us here at Facebook. I'm glad that during this June 5 Environment Day, meron po tayong discussion, a conversation about environment in the context of very, very local, like here in the south of Philippines, in Mindanao, in Bukidnon, and in Mount Kitanglad Range Natural Park. There's many people when they associate Mount Kitanglad, they simply think about it's a protected area, it's a national park. But in honor of the Environment Month, we learn two things. It's about nature and culture. So this is something more expansive to think of about our environment. It's really about people, the place, the culture. So I'm very excited. Thank you, Tito Ed, Ate Girlie, for this Senior City Kwentuhan and for other link, Inet, Siso, Lapis. No? So I'm glad that this afternoon I can provide some inspiring stories in my work here in Kitanglad.
Oh, talagang marami kaming kilala. Looking for. By the way, Chai, siguro you have to mute your other device kasi nag-e-echo. Anyway, let us just flash the next slide para ma-locate natin yung lugar, no? Kasi nga, well, I don't know, lalo na kasi karamihan sa ating other listeners, Metro Manila, they think Bukidnon, maybe they think only pineapples and the plantations. Pero yung point mo is, it's one of the, ang tawag mo nga parang halos natural capital. Ano yan eh, no? Watershed ng maraming rivers. Ano? Will you please tell us a little bit ng itong, sabi mo, the last forest blocks of Bukidnon province and the, marami, 10 ba yun? Ilan ba yung sinabi lang tribes, indigenous people sa Bukidnon? Tell us a little bit about that, Chay.
There's 7 indigenous groups in Bukidnon. So the ones with the arrows are those na nasakupan ng Kitanglad Integrated NGO, napuntahan namin or through Green Mindanao.
Okay.
So, kaya yung isang green down below at the southern side, hindi ko napuntahan, so I did not kind of included that one. But that's also important forest blocks sa mga matigsalog. But for the arrows of KKSP, it's an acronym for Kimangkil, Kalanawan, Sumagaya, Pamalihi. And the good thing about it is tribal protected areas. Before the government decides or the state decides that it should be a protected area, basically it's a tribal protected area. So it's a very sacred mountain for the Higaonon. So malaki yan, no? And then there's also Mount Pantaron Range. It goes down to San Fernando. So you deal with the Umayamnon, the Matigsalog in those areas. Ito yung upper part, and then at the center, then the Mount Kitanglad Park, where it's like our home court sa Kin. Kasi pati pangalan namin, Kitanglad. So it's now a natural park, and it's the first protected area ever declared in the Philippines under the National Integrated Protected Area System, under the NIPAS law. Year 2000, and then signed, of course, legislated, but also approved during the time of President Era Estrada. So that's legacy. And then Mount Kalatungan Range Natural Park, yung baba niya, became a permanent protected area in 2019 under the e-NIPAS, the expanded NIPAS law. So in the initial NIPAS, ilan lang yung mga protected areas. But in the 2019 legislation, mag-200 na itong mga parks na to. So that's how rich ang Philippines, because there's parks na terrestrial, may marine, di ba? Protected seascape landscapes. But when Kitanglad started, we were 10 protected areas from Batanes down to Turtle Island. So, mga classmates ni Kitanglad sa terrestrial would be Mount Apu, Mount Canlaon, and the only wilderness that we have, the Sierra Madre Mountain Range. So, it's like, wow, it's a really an awesome asset of the Philippines na hindi na-highlight, hindi lang kwentong Kitanglad to, but other protected areas that if you want to know about sa Mindoro, meron diyang Apo Reef. If you've been there.
Doon sa Sablayan, sa Occidental. Totoo.
Sablayan. Pero yung connect niyan, Batanes, Seascape Landscape, Apo Reef, and then yung Siargao Island Protected Seascape Landscape. Ito yung tatlong seascape landscape sa napulong 10 Pioneer Park. Ang tawag namin, Ayala Alabang. Alam niyo ba? Bakit?
Bakit?
Kasi yung dumadaan doon, mga tuna fishes. It's a highway of tuna fishes.
Wow.
Kasi ano nga talaga to parang rich marine resources, no? So it's not just a symbol of marine turtles, but tuna. So, yeah, and if you work with protected areas, you get to know also the assets we have, really of the rich flora and fauna. So, kung makita mo yung sa image na yung mapa na yan, halos magkapareha yung Kitanglad, Kalatungan. That's why they're called twin mountains.
That's right.
And then for people to easily recall at hindi sila makalimutan, we call it also like the KitKat protected areas.
Yung pala yung KitKat. I was wondering kung ano yun.
Kitanglad, Kalatungan protected area, so KitKat KA.
Okay.
Yes, so ayun, tsaka yung sinama mong picture dyan na pili is our first visit to Balmar, which is also like a Kalatungan. tribe. These are the Minugo.
Anyway, mamaya pag-usapan po natin ng more yung paano ba napapunta yan yung kwentong buhay ni Chai mismo. Pero bago yon, ang gusto kong pag-usapan po natin kasi excited ako nung una kong nalaman nung natapos yung project ni na Chai with the USAID dito sa sa Mount Kitanglad Range. Nag-produce sila ng ng isang libro na unusual because normally ang ibang libro pinoproduce ng researchers, ng writers, ganyan. Ito, yung mismong mga dato, yung tinawag ng wisdom keepers. At siyempre, may special, maliban sa special yon at nung nagkaroon ng launching, ni-launch na kasama yung USAID at saka yung DNR at yan, siyempre si Chai. Hindi pa namin alam yun noon. But then, when we found out later as nag-meet na kami, binigyan kami ni Chai ng one of the first few copies, special, signed pa niya. Kaya sabi ko kay Chai when we were planning this kwentuhan, ay Chai, bago yung ibang kwento, pagkwentuhan muna natin yung librong yan. Anong laman yan at bakit napasulat natin ang mga katutubo na normally ayaw yung magsulat, ayaw sabihin sa iba. So it's really, I think as of now, a very special book, na very unusual. At sabi nga ni Chai, nung kami naghahanda ng usapan, na kung saan may magaling na loob later dyan, na suportahang makapag-reprint kami ng mas maraming kopya, hindi lang para mabigyan ang ibang mga Pilipino, pero more important, ma-encourage ang ibang mga katutubong pamayanan at kanilang mga leader na magsulat rin. Dahil pwede naman at nagawa at maganda ang resulta. So, yun would you tell us something about yung kwento ng librong yan, Chai, including later yung mga susunod na slide natin, yung mga key authors, what you call, ang ganda ng pangalan, wisdom keepers, no? Okay. I presume ikaw ang nag-conceptualize, nagpakulo niyan, Chai, as an anthropologist. Sabi mo nga, sa halip na ikaw observer lang, nag-i-extract and then talk to others about it, ay parang you want the voices of the wisdom keepers themselves to be heard, no? Tell us a little bit about that book project.
Credit for this book is actually Dato Makapukaw Adelina Sala.
Wow.
Parang more than 5 years mag-cultural filing kami. Mag-cultural profiling kami. Why? Because in month
Oo.
And then, ang PAMBI na yan, may committee siya on research, right? So, the PAMBI existed from 1996 until now. So, kung merong magre-research for PhD, MA, magpapaalam dyan, whether sociology, anthro, but mostly biology studies. And then, of course, kasama siya sa PAMBIG, SICOM, pati si Bainat Lawan. So they get to approve research and then, the research is implemented. But Makapukaw has long been discerning that we have tribal schools, but we don't have books. And we cannot rely on the outside world to produce the books for us. And even if the teacher would be an indigenous person, but saan yung material niya? Hindi naman produkto ng DepEd yun eh.
Okay.
Nor, how much of the anthropological research went back to the community? So, he kept on pondering. Plus, 2 decades na siya sa park management. Pero, kung mag-exam kaya tayo ng pangimbatasan, so, customary laws, like yung sinabi nating FPIC. But nung una, na wala pa yung IPRA law and FPIC, it's an inherent gatekeeping practices of the tribe. Pag outsider ka talaga, meron kang pang courtesy papasok. Tayo nga when we were children, or as a child, pag bago ka sa lugar, and just to make sure you don't transgress or oppress anyone, you say tabi po.
Tao po, tao po. Tabi
Tao
po.
po, tabi po. Yes. Look at this way that these territories rich in natural resources are inhabited by indigenous people. But ano yung courtesy na yon? So, my earliest field work would be in 86. Kasi nag-graduate ako ng October 86. Tagal na, no? Pero diretso ako dito sa Mindanao. In my exposure, meron talagang pagpapaalam. Especially I went with the sisters and the missionaries. They really maintain this respectful attitude. So kahit hindi yan na-legislate, pero good thing na-legislate din yan because it will compel every one of us to observe the proper courtesy of entering into sacred domains or ancestral domains of the indigenous people. So Makapukaw said that if we want to be understood, respected, and promoted, then perhaps we need to start telling our stories. So that was just the logic. For us in the anthropologists, we would be happy because that we've been observing phenomena, behaviors, practices. This is a more advanced that the tribes will interpret, will choose what elements of culture they will tell their stories. And later on in the we would know that we are fortunate to have an indigenous leader who also took up anthropology. That's why he made a framework. And the reason we keep on that framework, because it's the indigenous. That's Dato Nikitay Diksaway. When he studied anthropology in Suleiman. So that's also an advantage. And Dato Makapukaw works as a public elected official for more than 30 years. So he knew all the gaps. So it's not just having an IPRA legislated, but how many stories that really tackles on the local realities. And from this, another local like Kalatungan. And I'm happy to share to this group that the Protected Area Management Board, the EXICOM of Kalatungan, adopted the cultural profiling of that was initiated by Makapukaw for Kitanglad. So meaning to say, if we have a cultural profiling in Kitanglad for the 3 tribes, which covers 3 of the 8 areas, then we also have the same for Kalatungan, with the own council elders also like establishing what kinds of information need to be profiled. And then during our discussions, because they also had research training, quote unquote, but Dato Makapukaw and the elders will always say, like, Ma'am, dili me researchers, ha? We are not researchers. Because the researchers associated as those that apply sa PAMDI ng permit and consent, di ba? For their study. That's like when you research, you don't know. That's why you research. We are the profilers, documenters, because we write from experience and we document what we know. So there's a big difference. So don't call our output like a research work. It's different. So so ganun. And then when we had that training, I said, this is the training that we have. We are fortunate, like my experience in 80, as early as 86, and I was working in Agusan when I started my work with the tribes. I think it was 86. I think Pons, I will really acknowledge Pons Binagan, MC Barameda.
Yeah.
Because in those 80s, as the tribes were already fighting for rights for the ancestral domain because anchored on the right for self-determination, the NGOs before were already teaching, doing research. And our mentors was Pons Benagen and MC Barameda.
Okay.
So, but that was how many years nag-evolve ito. And that was Agusan. Now in Bukidnon, the exposure of the IP leaders was really with the researchers. So they were trying to fill in the shoes. So what if kami na lang magsulat? That's going to be our book and it will serve our purpose.
Galing.
But since our donor is an American institution, USAID, and it's a DNR because we are in a national park, so I was asked, how come your book is English? It's not in indigenous. Because the owner of the money will not be able to understand Binukid. But when they read the report, because this is supposed to be a 9-month undertaking, but it took us 3 years to finish it.
Wow.
3 years because I I signed for a 65-page report, but I gave them a book.
Galing.
Why? Because every time when we had discussions with the elder, they will say it is for the book. They knew somehow it's gonna come out with a book, and who am I to say like, but it's not in the budget. So, but I said like, with so many good things happening in the formulation of the book, you would also understand it takes longer. And then if somebody would ask, ilang ritual ba yung dinaanan nyo? Like every chapter there, every elder, every cultural expert, may ritual first and another ritual for every topic. So ganun siya katindi because the message, the contents of the book are permitted oral
Yeah,
tradition.
kailangan
So
yan.
it's not just the knowledge of the cultural expert, it's also his experience. But once he recall the importance of ritual, the situations there, and there's a ritual, so there's another new communication with the nature spirit guides.
Mhm.
So from the point of view that the traditional sacred cultures were told and retold from ancestors, but the receiver of the present generation accepts it. But since it is assumed that each person has 5 nature spirits guides corresponding to nature elements, so there's an added element, yung faith mo, yung context, yung challenge, nagbago ba yung landscape, meaning to say how much of the sacred spaces naging picnic group dahil mountaineering na yung pupunta doon kasi di nila alam. And then even at Kitanglad Peak, there's a stone there, flat, like a tablet that everyone steps on to take picture, mag-selfie. That during the profiling, we found out this was an altar.
Ay,
Like,
naku, grabe.
nakakahiya tayo because we didn't ask. And
Yeah,
then they said, ay, hindi nagsabi nila, hindi nila dinidisclose yung sacred spaces.
yeah.
But it's really now an information age tayo, society. So there's an element that when you disclose, there's level of trust. And then Makapukaw said, don't worry, we have concepts of open secret and closed secret. So what we are sharing,
Okay. Are they
open
open?
secret,
Uh,
meaning to say, it's a bet. If someone reads this book and becomes an advocate for indigenous people, for nature, culture, biodiversity, then we
Yeah.
achieve the purpose of telling the story and to honor our descendant from the Tarandi, Bukidnon, and Igaonon tribe. But if some of those dismiss it,
Yeah, well,
force precious knowledge to them. So this is really for the privilege, but still we're ambitious. So you want to reprint 1,000 copies more because we want each tribe, community, and PO to have a copy so that they will decide if they will have their own cultural profile initiative and how do you do with the framework, no? But they will say it later sa design ni Dato Nikitay.
susunod. Tama.
But when you describe culture, what you have in mind, they will say way of life, spirituality, livelihoods. So that's why when you see it, it's all there. It's in the book.
Gusto ko
So that's why
muna, Chai, I want to just butt in. Kasi you showed pictures nung sa them holding bawat isa na yung section niya pinapakita. These are the oras I could get from your Facebook page. Pero only 6 of them ba ang nandiyan sa loob or are there a few more? Wala lang tayong picture. Or they are the main authors, yung kanilang
there's many pictures there.
Kasi yung
And
anim
then usually, when you come to Kitanglad, I've been around to different IP communities, but for Kitanglad, like the likes of the council elders, their communities, as long as kilala ka with the family, with the paso and kin, and then you are, courteous enough to say, may I take pictures, pwede. But there are really other communities who say, no, no, why did you take pictures? So, ang level of trust sa mundo hindi pa na-build. So there's so much wounds of discrimination and distrust. So that's why it takes a lot of. We have to make sure that there's a high trust, high relationship when you undertake this kind of community endeavor of profiling their tribe. Because in fact, when we had the ritual, and the ones doing the profiling and documenting are actually like descendants nila, either pamangkin, kasi that's the rule eh. Kasi may element of nature there na kinoconsider. So the role of kin was just only to translate and arrange it not into a 65-page report, but actually in a book, because there's so many information shared. But I was very also happy that USA Dewiser, when they read the whole contents, they said there's got to be a binukid book for this version.
dapat. Version.
They tried to have translated material, but only just few copies, just to ensure to bring it back to the kinabai, kinadato, just to have this copy in binukid. But our aspirations also, like when you have a binukid book in a tribal language, in the mother tongue, the users will not be the outside world.
Yeah.
It will be in the insides of the community. So that's why in areas like we were translating, we're really having difficulty in translating. Sometimes we skip it, we just maintain the indigenous name. And then in my learnings as an anthropologist working with ritualists and really very traditional leaders, sometimes if they say something about the name of the elder or the ancestor, it's enough that you put power to that word because you write it. But sometimes I cringe, I tremble to mention those names because those are very sacred. So that's how I treat this cultural value from the point of view that if I'm the elder telling you, and then some of the very depth interviews, we also kind of not included in the book because there's supposed to be another book to follow. It's spirituality and political structure. So this is just an initial, and then there's something also like another book on music and arts because of the talents of the tribe. And then another elders very excited, like can we expound on cosmology? Going to the climate change. It's very good that they get to tell the story of how they view the atlas, the world, the stars, reading the stars. So we've started it, and because of this, we also had many requests. Can we start this? And we believe that with the openness, we can also provide them with the framework how we were able to do it. But it will be Dato Makapukaw will be explaining how we did it in Mount Kitanglad. And he keeps on having inspired ideas. And don't be surprised if you see Dato Makapukaw and Bai, tinkering with their laptops, like they're trying to really write their stories. And then Dato Makapukaw said, sira na yung laptop niya. And then sabi ko, next time we'll do another profiling, you'll have your own another laptop.
Tama.
Computer na, pero that's how nag-adapt din yung leaders natin. So don't be surprised if they're into technology, but they're just too inspired to write about their inspiration, nuances of what they see about changes in the culture. And come to think of it, we never really cared. You don't even have a summit wherein the elders are the ones speaking or the ritualists. They're just kapak lang daw sila, sabi ni Dato Makapukaw. So one time he got so disappointed because he doesn't have an NA. Oh, and they're called experts of the field. And I said, wow. And he really comes back to his room really sad. And I said, Dato, we will find a way. There's got to be a space. And I keep dreaming. And I have the chance to go to international conferences. When I step on the floor, on the building, like in the GCF, Green Climate Funds, board meeting, in my reflection, I wrote that to both ends who sponsored my trip. I keep on saying elders of Kitanglad will be here to tell the stories. And we should be all listening to them. Not in the Philippines. Philippines is still not excited to hear from them. Perhaps the international platform would be more excited to hear from them.
I want to bring you to the slide. Galing po ito kay Chai na suggestion, and I really was so glad about it because what she said is totoo na sa elders or wisdom keepers, taboo to discuss yung sa loob. Pero the fact that they chose, hindi naman lahat, selectively na i-share. I mean, ang lalim, yung sabi mo nga, rather than saying, kami na lang, protect ourselves, withdraw from the world, they know, kailangan mag-interact ka sa dominant culture sa labas eh. So, hindi lamang yung binanggit mong the technology, but more important na yung sarili mong salita, sarili mong pag-iisip ay ma-communicate at hindi lamang through others, no? Ang ganda nung, and this came from Dato Makapukaw, ano? Sabi mo nga, Chai, ano? And I'm glad you called my attention. So hinanap ko sa slide pong pinadala ni Chai, and we're posting it here, and I hope in the future you'll read that na. Because I was saying earlier, in the limited time we had some work with the Subanen in the Zamboanga Peninsula, we had the same dilemma with the Timuways na ayaw nilang mag-share ng kanilang parang insights or how they anong tawag nun, yung initiate into the tribe yung yung mga the children and the youth, because sabi nila that can only be done within a ritual setting. Hindi yan sinusulat parang textbook. Pero later they also said, sabi namin, para ho may access naman yung iba, no? And the compromise they had, sige, maybe around 30% we will choose. Siguro yung sinabi ni Dato Makapukaw na meron namang secret na pwedeng open, open secret, at merong secret na secret talaga. A lot of us, sabi mo nga, Chay, in our age, in our culture na information, dapat alam ng lahat-lahat. Hindi ganun kasimple yun because it's power, sabi mo. It can be used against you. And mahalaga yung point. And sa mga nakikinig po, who knows, we might get lucky. Baka may people interested there. Nag-aanap po kami ng sino ang angel sponsor na tulungan ang ating mga indigenous leaders who are willing and able to share what they want to share, no? Para matulungan po natin because my gosh, yan ang isang resource ng Pilipinas na hindi pa natin talaga fully na-appreciate at na-realize. But the reality nga is, if you are not published, hindi ka alam ng iba, hindi mo ma-communicate, mamaya mawawala na lang yan. No? Just like other languages that die, there will be also cultures that die with the culture bearers. No? So on this day of environment, very broad, but a special place for indigenous knowledge and indigenous people, no? And we cannot dwell forever and too long on this because sabi ko lang kay Chay, maybe the first segment of roughly 30 minutes, pero I want to concentrate on the book because I really think it's very special, no? But then, after that, sabi ko, well, people will be wondering, and that's always a senior sa city po, ang tanong namin lagi, dapat may kwentong buhay yung aming guest. You don't have to be senior to be a guest, but you have to have a lot of experience. And people are always curious, Chay, bakit ka ba napupunta dyan? As a young student, were you already interested in anthropology? And why did you land up in Mindanao and all that? Sabi niya, sa halip na kwentuhan kita, hanapin mo nga yung Synergos site, at pinadala niya yung site na merong short write-up, exactly the same ho ang Synergos, 2 paragraphs lang. Sabi ko, magandang introduction ito so that Chay can tell us a little bit. Although ito, 96, sabi nga na, 86 ka pang nag-graduate as an anthropologist. Will you tell us something about that, yung journey mong yan, no? And we'll show other pictures later, no? So bakit ka pa talaga nag-interest sa anthropology?
Yeah, good question. And perhaps dila sa college na interest as a child, I always ask difficult questions to my parents, especially to my mother. I said, like, I was 7 years old or 8. I asked her, like, Mama, what is life? Wow. And then nagpaplansa yung mama ko, sabi niya, ha?
Lalim
and
naman.
then she could not answer, so I went out. I observed. I like observing, and then I came back. I said, like, Ma, if life is about, like, as a baby, you grow up, you study, and then you graduate, and you get married, and then have a job, and then you get old, take care apo, and then before you die, you plant a tree. I better not being born.
Wow.
So I knew somehow that this life has something to do, and then I studied in all girls school in Immaculada, and when under influence of the Saint Vincent de Paul, uh, and also with the Daughters of Charity, so they also have exposure na pwede yung Saturdays namin we offer for catechism, and then also I'm part of Children of Mary, so may foundation na ganyan, and in college, activista naman, that's why I have my Chai as a name, it's a code name. Kasi an activist na babae, Chai. Pag lalaki, Choy. But I
Ganun
brought
pala
with me
yung
Chai
choice.
because, yeah. Kasi ang Easterluna kasi always gets mispronounced.
Oo.
And then, better Chai na lang. So, and then, so in college, my daddy wants to encourage me to take a pol sci because he wants me to proceed to law and pass the bar for him. But I like reading books, especially mga old books, and then I chance upon big album anthropological books, and tsaka yung National Geographic kind of picture, and then it was really like moved my spirit, and I said, so why these people? And then of course in the Filipiniana collection, the University of San Carlos, we have good Filipiniana collection. So there you see them. And I said, oh, they're in Mindanao, not in Cebu. And that time, Mindanao is like associated with Gira, Muslim, mamatay ka dito kung Kristiyano ka. So with all those mislabeling ba. And then of course, transition to Marcos, mga activism why we became activists, because there was a priest who disappeared, Father Romano.
Si Romano.
And then he was with the community, enlightening them about their rights and things like that. So, and we have a good professor, Zini Oy, said like, allowed us to analyze our waste basket, trash can at home.
Wow.
And then from there, look at the products that you use from head to toe. So we got this, the shampoo and all, then we segregate it and like, so which one produces this one. And does this corporation bring something to the economy? And that started to raise questions. And when we were, rallying, and then we are being summoned by the university, and we're always being dressed down and told like, you should be studying, not be concerned about societal issues. And then all critical books were gone in the library at that time.
Wow.
And it's good now, the generations now, they have Google.
Yeah,
But that time, all those special text, they're all gone. So there's really this quest. And anthropology provides that space wherein, you can take a deep dive to know communities, indigenous people. You have to really walk out from your comfortable space.
You have to go to their communities. That's right. And you got, in a sense, no, the opportunity came, while we're waiting for Chai to reconnect. Kasi nga,
I'm here.
kanyang, we're waiting for you. Pero let's jump to 96, So what, 10 years after graduation, more or less, mabuti na lang, you had this, 7-year program and I focus. Sabi mo nga, one of the very first, national, protect, sa NIPAS program. I didn't know it was that significant, And 11 days to work, ang galing,
Yes. So from that, when I joined the bridging leadership at AIM in 1997, I was practically doing a lot of bridging work already for the community. Yeah. And what is interesting, because as we enter in the space, you are tested there not because of your academic intelligence like that, but more of your empathy, your sincerity. these people, when you enter communities, they really see you through yourself, through your, deepest self. They kind of see your soul. And sometimes, if I'm be permitted to share my earliest encounter with Bai, like she would say to me, Bai Natlawan, the babaylan of Kitanglad, she would say to me that, I know you're coming because your spirit guide is already ahead telling me not to go. And I said like, wow. And in college also, I got so interested with chakras, energy.
Ganon.
And when I first arrived in Butuan in 1987 to attend a big ritual of the tribes there under Lubasan. So I was really preparing myself because I was kind of running away from home because my mom wanted me to work in Cebu. But I knew somehow with this very restless spirit and more, unanswered question, I think I might find it in the place of my father in Mindanao. That's why I choose to after graduation, really went to Mindanao. And then I was really preparing. And then when I stepped out of the vehicle. I'm led to that place in Ampayon for the ritual. There was a slight earthquake. Like, what is this? A welcome or it's a sign? Like, is it good to be here? And then when I went there, and that time I was so interested with feeling, sensing energies because there's also a lot of literatures on that luminous beings, sacred beings in the sacred places, and you get to hear this in some of the spiritual texts, ancient texts, write-ups. And when I went there, I was just because you're a stranger, you're new, like you were just observing a gathering of like almost 100, and then half of it like they're really like chieftains of different tribes. I was like, wow, anthropology coming alive
Yeah.
in front of you. And then I said, but who's the high chieftain? Because you don't say like happy, di ba? Sinong bida? Always at the
Yeah.
presidential table. But there in a circular manner, you would never know who's the highest leader there.
Circle.
But I kind of calm myself because the RGS sister told me just observe. And that was part of my immersion, like exposure, whether I like enjoy work or not, or disappear, I go back to Cebu. So they were also kind of observing my attitude in dealing with tribes. So I keep my silence. I was so quiet. I was also like concentrating to get to know them. And then one of those that I find really like wow, very strong energy. And then when I came closer to him, he's the overall chieftain of the Banwaon.
Wow.
I call them my cultural parent. The late
Yeah.
Dato Mario Napungahan. And he has a semblance of my father's face. I lost my father in 83. So, and it's like, wow, it's like there's part of me feels like home. And why do I feel such very strong energy? Because they were in a ritual, and the ritualists they dance under trance. Under trance. Imagine you're a fresh graduate of anthropology and you have that before your eyes, like, and buti ngayon, meron yung pang recording, di ba? Dito is just remembering. Your mind would have to remember what strikes you most, and to bridge that tribe to trust the outside world. That's something. And this is where I get my culture shock. So one time I went to Agusan. We went to the community of the Banwaon in Mahagsay. I was escorted by the chieftain of Manobo. Dato, forgot his name. I will not mention na lang. So he was escorting us in our trek there. And then, of course, we love rivers. We're from the ciudad, but we love rivers. Wow, we want to swim in the river. So we're excited. From the host house, we leave our stuff, and then we ran to see the river. And one time I said like, oops, I forgot my bag, my backpack. There's an office camera there. And then the people, the Banwaon there were with me. Like, don't worry, ma'am. Wala Cristiano diri. It's a culture shock, like, don't worry, ma'am. Wala Cristiano diri. So dili na mawala. Your stuff will
Walang
get lost.
magnanakaw. Diyos
Like my
ko. Pangalan ng Kristiyano.
first culture shock. Like, so But there's a lot of culture shocks, but really to build trust was really something. So it took really years. And then when I share my stories to AIM, they got me because I was working on the social exclusion and indigenous people. So they like that for a social divide that they want to do to connect with.
Yeah.
And then after finishing the program, I applied to Synergos, and I learned that the Synergos Institute first really come up with the social research on bridging leadership,
Yeah.
the bridging leader, and what it takes to be a leader. And until now, here in the Philippines, we are still trying to combine
Yeah.
stories that would make up a Filipino leader, with our own experiences and challenges. So that's a lot, but I still remain to work with indigenous people. It's nice to be with the elders. Their smiles, their kindness, their softness, really like it's like a medicine. It refreshes your sense of being to your soul.
I like nga, alam po nyo, although I prepared the slides, all of these materials po came from Chai. But the next one I chose while magkikwento siya ng personal stories niya, just as ang ganda ng symbolism na isa sa paborito rin naman niya nung sa bridging leadership, it's always a journey. Ang question is journey with whom, journey towards where. And I really think if you have the chance, although ako talaga, normally when I do research sa ating guests, I look kung sila may Facebook, I scroll all their pictures. Arami ng mga pictures, including yung sinabi mo, China, crossing rivers, etc. Pero nabigla ako just to share a personal link sa kwento mo. When I work with the Mangyans, ako po'y taga Mindoro, but I'm Tagalog, not Mangyan. And was a young seminarian, I went to Panaytayan in Mansalay, and I saw the Mangyans helping each other. And I thought I was going to praise them by saying, wow, ang bubuti niyo, nagtutulungan kayo para kayong mga Kristiyano. Naku, naisulto yung mga Mangyan. Sabi nila, hindi kami Kristiyano. Ang mga Kristiyano rito yung nangaagaw ng lupa. Grabe talaga. I mean, when you realize that, our prejudices, a lot of us, the lowlanders, the city dwellers, the Christians, they think we are pagans. You don't realize that how negative their karanasan, no, sa mga taong who use the law, the religion, the institutions, and really, oppress and exploit them. So, very humbling, tama yung point ni Chay. When we go there, dahan-dahan ka. Huwag kang pumasok na walang permiso at saka respetuhin mo. And beyond that, to learn a lot, no? I mean, just using this picture lang because the next slides po natin, i-share ni Chay yung some of the framework and insights galing sa mga dato mismo, including binanggit niya, Kinabiksaway at yung if you were asked, other than what you have already shared, yung sa journey mo, if you were asked, are there some key milestones or key, remembering, learning na gusto mong i-share sa atin as this young anthropology graduates, naghahanap ng meaningful relationship to indigenous communities in Mindanao, but an activist background, you have your own intellectual discipline. You were asked, looking back now, a few 2 or 3 key milestones, insights on the way?
I will. Again, later that, but I need to tell this story.
Ay, iba pa kayo sa huli.
Why I really stick it out? Why did I stick it out to this kind of work?
Yeah,
In my exposure in Agusan, we went up to Magsay. At that time, you can see logging trucks getting all the big trees. Usay, minsan, one truck, one big tree, one big lawang tree. So we went as far as the areas of the landing in Nikalan, further for an exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was really striking to us was the Banwaons on this Talandig, and this is not the Talandig of Bukidnon because they're in the boundary of Agusan. They talk like birds.
Oh.
They're tall, lean, white skin. Why? Because the canopy of forest blocks the sun. So hindi sila brown, puti sila. and very, very curly hair, and then black teeth because of the beetle chew mama that they eat.
Yeah.
And then they live by the cliff, and then they take out the ladder every night to us make sure that no one will poke them with a lance or a spear, or just to make sure the enemy won't come up. And with the interpretation, so we went there, we were with the host chieftain, but when we woke up in the morning, I saw a lot of eyes looking at us. There were about four of us. They were looking at us like, who are these people? And then we tried to explain our purpose like that. And then what really saddened me, and then that also like a life changer, or if it's life is a game, it's a game changer, because they tell us like, how come you allow this logging company to take out the trees? And then he said, like, by interpretation, it's like an attempt to understand what they were trying to say. They were given one sack of salt, and this box that sounds but doesn't sound anymore, that's a radio.
Radio, yeah.
And it's like for me, this is my reaction. For me, they've been taking out your trees, cut down your trees, and they only paid you with salt and radio. It's like, wow. So when I went back, I was really like, I felt so frustrated, and I said, we are not like that. I will try to show you we are not like that. Yung pangawat, pangilad ng mga Kristiyano, gagnegosyo sa kinayahan, take advantage of nature, we are not like that. So I knew somehow, probably that could be a milestone for life, because I choose to work here, no matter how stable being in the NGO. And I knew I wanted to prove that the indigenous way of life, balancing nature and culture, and come to think of it, they're not confused with the invisible and visible elements. Tayo, nako-confuse tayo. Like, tuo kag inkanto ba? And then Bai talks to you about your spirit guides. And my volunteers, they're always green in terms of their, kung meron tayong aura check, Bai makes sure that she also screens the people that come here to be volunteers of kin. She feels and senses your sincerity. So this is really like not ordinary way of getting to know someone who will be an ally for life and for good. And so I think that's one. And then other is that Kitanglad also being a protected area that is legislated in 2000. Of course, legislated, you have to think about the senators who lobbied. At that time, the chair for Environment Committee was Jaworski. He came down here with his committee. He made a lot of Q&As, whether it's worthy to protect Kitanglad by legislation. And then, of course, the Congress there before, I think Acosta, they were there, Eric. So when they lobbied for it, it's good thing that the 28 barangays around Kitanglad, during barangay assemblies, we had a discussion on issues and concern that should be looked into in framing the law. So I would say that Mount Kitanglad Act is a product of social legislation, because it has the endorsement from the 28 barangays, and then also with the council of elders, and they also like elevate that so that the Congress would have notes to what it does with the framing of the law. And also like in the Q&A, Dr. Mikita was there, Governor Fortich was there, the PAMBI, the pastor were there. So I was also asked about the social economic side of the community, how they are, whether they really needed help. And it was sad because when the law was passed, this is the first law in the Philippines on protected areas specific to Mount Kitanglad. It did not indicate an annual budget from the national government to be prime for Kitanglad. So every year we have to strive for a protected area management fund. So there's an IPAP, but IPAP is coming from income from the protected area, but not as an inherent fund to run the whole business of protected area management. But since we were the first and the succeeding protected areas that already have specific laws, would really have a legislation or a stipulation terms of budgeting. It's not just about the local, owing to the national and global significance of the biodiversity that are being protected, conserved here in the protected area. So that's second. And third, I think it really is be able to conduct tribal congress. So kung may kongreso ang Pilipinas, mga senado at senator, we also have tribal congress. We also have Lambaga Summit. Way back in Davao, when we had the Kalangana, the ritual of the 18 tribes. So invest on a space wherein the tribes meets together, and there's no other agenda but what comes out in the ritual. So sometimes when we have activities, like we have rituals, especially Kaliga, sacred rite, that's we're able to reinforce back in Bukidnon. All our agenda daplin because something comes out in the omen during the ritual and we have to adjust. So meaning to say, in dealing with the tribes, be also open to learn from the voices of the spirit guides that comes during the ritual and it's being manifested in the omens in the conduct of the ritual.
Grabe, no? Ano yun, Chai, these congresses, tribal congresses, how regular? Do you do it annually or depende sa, ano ba?
Good question. We had it in every year from 1997, 98, 99, 2000, but after the World Bank project already ended, and came it's free from the faults of being a host NGO, but until now, we still maintain the host NGO relationship with the Park Superintendent of Kitanglad and also in Kalatungan. But in 2005, when I came back, and thanks to Brother Lek Delen, who revived Kin, while I was studying in Ateneo, they said, Kin should come back. So that's BD, that's Arnold. And then, of course, from there, Arnold Vandenbroek. And then from there, Oxfam Hong Kong came in to support the claim. Because before, it was too impossible to make a claim in Kitanglad, especially when it started with a unified claim. And this is the earliest assertion of IPRA that if you want to make a claim for the bigger areas, but what are the resources? If we would have the Matig Salog Free Matrix as the biggest, more than 100 hectares CADP, but when it was approved, there was a presidential commission to do it, a task force, not by their own. But back in the original normal situation, how do you get support? So at that time when I was doing my thesis work for Kitanglad, and then there was still a problem with DNR and Talaambig, so I choose that my fieldwork will be with Bainatlawan. And then she asked me also that my thesis will be part of the CADP documents to support their claim, because I will just be dealing on their community. So that's also like a struggle. And then we have the first CADP ever approved in a protected area like in Mount Kitanglad. How many CADPs are more? More than 10, aside from the unified claim. But do they have resources? Nada. And it takes really a different kind of maturity, even in the solidarity, the political structure, and readiness to also write a lot, because when you file a claim, even Bai just high school level, but I think she has written a lot for the CADP. So it's a different level of leadership, but you have to match that because somebody would have to bridge for it, and that's definitely the work of Kim.
Galing. Wow, alam mo, I was telling you at the beginning, we'll have so much to talk about. I'll have to do the timekeeping. Alam mo, I'm sure you did not notice. We have already been talking for an hour and we have only 30 minutes to go. So let us go to the last 30 minutes. And we are discussing two big things pa. Ang una nga because when I pitched this, remember the title I used, hindi learning from, kundi learning with the wisdom keepers, no? And lahat ito mga slides na pinadala ni Chai. The first part is just quickly po, because mga frameworks naman, she cannot really explain them all in detail. Mga galing sa mga dato na mga framework about understanding their culture, their structure, and all that. So let's go through them because gusto kong even a few minutes towards the end, magkwento ka man ng konting panahon ng COVID, paano nag-adjust itong trabaho ninyo. No? So let's start muna with the first framework na pinasok mo, the importance really of culture, the cultural context as a vital solution to problems. But especially, this came from her, sabi ko, ang buti naman napili dito ni Chai because our worry always po sa IPs, in the news, is naiipit rin po sila sa ano, no, sa tension between counterinsurgency and insurgency, relation to military and the rebels and all that. And neither side, no, because they look at them politically, understand yung integrity ng kultura ng at identity ng mga tribo, no? So ang laking bagay na I think that's the one you were telling us, visible and invisible and all that, no? I'll just advance the slides as you explained. To explain that, and then you know the other datos naman who presented from Bigsaway at sina Dato Makapukaw. Share with us. Ito na yung learning with sa mga ating wisdom keepers. No?
Yeah. This one, we chose this picture to explain because there's so many slides I sent you. So this is very relevant because in 2012, there was a bombing incident in Kitanglad, and it damaged a portion of the intact forest in Mount Dulang-Dulang. And it turns out to be part of the Kadti of Bayan-Matlawan, sa side sa Daraguyan. And in fact, since we don't have history of wars and bombings here in Bukidnon, the tales of the kids and boys, like when the drums were dropped from the helicopter, they described it like gipanghulog na thermos. Thermos daw. And instead of running away from it, they ran towards it, like, where is it being dropped? Wow, so that was the perception. And of course, there was a reason that Colonel Gapos is now general, no? And he's retired. He said that they want to rescue my people from my men because the NPA is about to overcome them. So this is one reality of a protected area and ancestral domain. There are also rebel forces there hiding. And for some tribal groups that they're in the community and they have a space in the domain, kasi hindi man yan ancestral land nga, maliit lang, it's domain. So they don't have guards to every nook and corner of the territory. And where did the bombs hit and damage? It's a sacred space. And it's already documented here in the book. Why? Because it's intact forest, and then for the tribes, the mountains are their cathedrals. Remember, these are indigenous, pre-colonial. Walang engineers nung una, walang architects, walang semento. But then the natural affinity of a human being is to pray for someone higher than above, responsible for all these creations. So we have a natural leaning towards being spiritual. So there's portion of the intact forest na may altar, may bangkaso, and it damaged there. And then since Bai is part of Bambi, Governor Kalingasan in his time, he was also with Bambi, and he was with Bambi from start. He can summon the battalion commander, right? And the initial reaction was, why am I made miserable? I'm doing my duty as a military. But they said, you're being summoned by the governor, so he has to abide, right? And Bai was there, and she thought like Bai is a big person like that. But when she saw Bai very diminutive, like he calmed down and he listened and he said, in these wars, war is energy. It's hatred. It's anger. Now, Bai, the Babaylan, was explaining war beyond the physical. It's energy of hunger. And then when you drop the bomb, when you hit a place where we are praying, that cannot be. Because these places where we prayed protect all of us. So we need to say sorry. And he said, why should I say sorry? No, not sorry to the nature spirit because we have desecrated the place because of that bombing. But since there's also a reason, that's why the tribes mediate. The whole Bukidnon tribe will mediate, meaning to say, you will say sorry from the context of cultural prayers. So it's really something new, right? So when he came there, it's like, but what am I supposed to do? Like, bring pig. And then chickens, of course. But what was interesting in the pig, Bai said it's a spotted pig with a golden collar. Where do you find that kind of pig now these days? Just one pig, but the spotted one with a black with a golden. How do you find that? It's like, what if might no? You have to find that, of course. And he said, okay, I will come in the day that there will be a ritual to say sorry. Did the commander find his pig? He ordered his men to look for it until he found it in Malaybalay.
Wow,
There is a pig
really?
supposed to be bought, but the one who reserved it did not came back.
Wow.
So it was meant to be the pig to be brought, but it's not 40 kilo. It's just about half of the weight of the prescribed pig. He sent it up, and that was the first time in the Heritage Center that the 400 Brigade sent some men to clear the area because their commander would be there. And he was with his high officials then, the lieutenants, because he was colonel at that time. He was there. And then, of course, he said, can I be allowed to bring an interpreter? So he brought an interpreter because he would not know the prayers, right?
Yeah.
But since King is also doing the bridging work for many tribes, I summon all the tribes to be there to witness this new reality wherein the hills of anger and hatred manifested into shooting each other can be resolved in one place. And we also sent pillars to OPAP, hoping it will reach the other side to be present because it's both sides saying sorry ritual to one sacred place. It's a peace zone supposedly. But we weren't able to come. So because I was a consultant of OPAP, so it didn't push through. And then the person from OPAP wasn't able to come as well. It was Dayang Hirang. So he missed this opportunity to witness, no? But that was it. So there was a ritual, and they were there to observe. They were polite. They listened, and they knew that we had to say sorry to Mother Earth. That's why blood had to be poured from the chicken, and just to say sorry, they also like killed small chickens. And then the military. This is documented, no, by Alex Baluyat as well. Video just to show that reconciliation can really happen. And the thing is, the result there is that the commander said, "Bye, this is ancestral domain." I was very surprised that the people, the community, they're very warm. In fact, when he came with the officers, the children meet him and make manupo.
Yeah.
So there was no really scars of war because this is protected area management. This is national park working with the NAR and LGS and everybody. And they had that. So I was just there to explain. And then there's also other like adjustments, no? Like culture shock when you enter the tribal hall. So they brought your butas with you, and
Yeah.
then the some of the caretakers of the heritage center said that when you enter this space, you have to be barefooted or you have to remove your shoes
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's an altar there. You can see in the picture there's an altar. So I also
Yeah.
have to tell them. So I think a lot of explanation would help heal. And then what was the significance of that ritual? So it's a sorry ritual, and Bai also asked sorry with them because they mediated. So there's pinpointing it was your fault, it was their fault. No, together we had to say sorry. And I think this is part of the healing rituals of the indigenous people that needs to be appreciated because later on that would be also contexted in the COVID response when the tribe say sorry in behalf of all of us.
Yeah. Galing, galing. You know? Itong maybe we'll have to rush to the next one because they're really more conceptual. But just to show them, no? Kasi nga, others say, oh sige, maraming kwento, maraming insights. Pero itong mga conceptual systems framework na galing mismo mga dato, just go through them quickly because I think they should get a glimpse or at least a taste of it. Ang una rito yung sinabi mo nga na si Dato Biksaway, meron siyang dinevelop mismo and even visualize na cultural personality of the Talaan tribe as an IP framework, no? Grabe if you look at that,
Yeah, this is to answer wherein I also like work with OPAP. No, my role in OPAP was to make sure that the OPAP team, when they go to tribal areas, they would be at least they will be advised or warned if there's something that we missed out in terms of indigenous, and that was my role. So we went to one place in Combal, and then the tribes there, I think Mangguangan, Mangguangan di babaon. So when they were summoning, the USEC was trying to summon everyone for, for a talk, like what are your concerns? But this is very fast, like a matter like 1 hour, because this is a critical area. And I said, like, so where are the tribes here? Then when I heard from the barangay, they said, now, there are tribes here, but they don't practice culture. Wala na sila, nada, parang nada. And knowing that we were educated, we in kin were educated to look at every culture space to have these elements. And you cannot say, who are the ritualists here? Check. Who are the economists here? No, you don't do that. But it's I really like sensing deeply. And then true enough, there was one of them who crossed the river and really attended there. But since he was not prominent, and he was not also like really dressing up like the full IP regalia. He was just but he had this small sheet na pack ng cigarette. He wrote what he wanted, like to fix the bamboo bridge because the children cannot cross. In times of rain, it's risky. And then he asked for something supportive livelihood and like a tribal hall. So three things lang. And then Yusek Montalvo was about to come up with his conclude, no, because he talks with everyone in the public officials in the municipal. But he said like somebody raised about the river, the hanging bridge by the river, and he went there. So he was talking to like the vice mayor, and they were in the middle of that bridge over the river. But that was the content of the note of the chieftain. And then going back, they said there was a movement like something happened, like what's happening? And said Yusek had an accident, like something slipped in his palm. And me as anthropologist and working with a tribe, I consider it an omen. And the omen comes to the leaders of group. And he's the Yosek. He's the highest official. And I was looking at, he was talking to he was discussing about plans and then by the bridge or things like that. So I also like message my friends from the Mandaya tribe in the vicinity. Are there omens like this? And then when I went there, I asked the people by the side, like, is there a chieftain here siya? Yes, ma'am, he went there, he crossed na. He felt bad kasi di daw siya makaduol. He won't be able to go to the USEC and really, meet him and express his concerns. So I said, I went back to USEC, he's back. I said, it's just a small cut. And then I said, sir, we have a 1 peso? Sabi niya, what? Yes, sir. Sorry, I was trained in the Bukidnon way of communicating. May I ask for a 1 peso? Normally, people prominent don't bring 1 peso. They ask for another peso. Okay, but always bring 1 peso if you enter here in Bukidnon. So I have the 1 peso, and then it took a while, and like to think we're running out of time. So I went there. So I got his 1 peso. I went there, and then I said, "Where is the old man?" Oh, he came back. He came back, crossed from the other side, and I met him by when he get to the center place sa poblasyon, and I said, "Dato, ako si Sir, I'm with the OPAP," things like that, and then handed him over the coin. Sorry, Kario. Sorry that we didn't notice you. But Yusek would like to hear if you have something to say to him. Then he was showing me the small piece of paper. It's like this one, and go, come. And then it so happened that they were finishing, and I wavered to, like, please come over. This is the chieftain. And then he had his like 5 minutes to talk, and then the Yusek got the piece of paper. And then in the van, he was asking what was that, Chai? And I said, when you were listening and soliciting ideas what can be helped by the pamana of OPAP, but you were talking by the river. But I think that river is a significant area, and someone listened there. I think the cut in your palm was a sign that they listened. So did I did something wrong? No, it's something that you should remember and not to be taken for granted. And when I remember when I gave the coin to the chieftain, he was uttering in Wangan word, deep words, and he was praying. And then he got the coin and dropped it to the river. And I just said to him that we are not yet in the same level to understand these dynamics, but I know someone is watching by the river and we have to say sorry to him because we did not recognize him. But please forgive us, and we hope that the ones we wrote in the note will reach to OPAP and it will be implemented. So this one shows that you cannot say there's no ritualist there, there's no cultural expert there. Don't deny that, because for every territory, there is an indigenous clan, descendant, and elders. They do not show themselves. We have to find a way to earn this trust, and they will be like brave enough to present themselves with dignity, and we have be able to accept who they are. So this is one good example that there's many cultural experts, ritualists, oralists, arbitrator, healers, economists, and don't forget the warriors, the arms and the feet, the tribal guard. That's the pagalad, alimaong, whatever you call that, to defend the territory.
Sige, I think we'll have to skip the next slides, Chai, no? Because I don't like to miss the last point that you sent to me, from another talk about, kasi people will be asking, okay, all that wisdom discussing what happened now during the time of COVID. And how did the indigenous people, and also kin in relation to them. And I'm so happy po that in another workshop or seminar, Chai was asked to discuss Rami Laudato Si, COP and all that. And nag-present siya, and nakita ko some of the slides is in relation to COVID. And every time we do po this Senior City Kwentuhan, towards the end, we ask people, paano yung COVID? Not only how did you cope, how did you react, and what you're thinking. And we have only a few slides here, but I think it's good to share, Chai, yung thinking nila sa COVID, and then also how you also link to that in your own work as kin. No? So will you walk us through this? These are all Hope from Her slides, no?
Yes. Yeah. So actually, this is more relevant issue, this pandemic, and I knew somehow when Bukidnon canceled the Kamulan. That was a really a big thing because government anticipated there will be mass gathering, delicado. And then since every opening of the Kamulan, there's a ritual of the 7 tribes. That one you cannot postpone. That is very serious for the tribes. But since there's already like lockdown, social distancing, like strict rules to wear masks and observe the protocols, the only ones who were summoned are the nearer, so Lantapan, Malay-Balay. And turns out these are the leaders of Kitanglad. So in behalf of the 7 tribes, the office of the IPMR convened for the ritual. And Bai said, it's no longer the ritual to say sorry, no Kamulan. Since there is COVID, they perform Panalawahig and Pamusa ritual. And why is the relevance that in the picture you saw them offering something in the creek? No? Why? Because COVID represents, in terms of nature elements, there were previous slides that shows that these are elements very important to us. Represents the element of water. That's why we wash our hands to protect ourselves from COVID. Also represents like air and wind because it floats. We don't see the virus. Third is land because it still drop on land if we still get infected. And we have to understand how tribes graphos interpret disaster because from there they also have their own solutions. And the solution has something to do with ritual prayers to say sorry. Why? We need protection from the water spirit, but we pollute water. That's a shame. That's why they were also saying sorry first. That we abuse nature, we abuse biodiversity, and then we have this pandemic. So they have to communicate to the spirit of each element. So there they offer that one, and they said like their interpretation how come COVID happens and perhaps might not be able to leave us so soon because of the way we treat nature. How do we treat water? How do we treat the environment? And in fact, even in some of the happenings of this COVID and even these floodings and all these disasters, sometimes the Filipinos make a joke out of it. There's something wrong with our inside. So while we're busy buying, hoarding alcohol, face masks, and all, the first resort of the tribe is to conduct a sorry ritual. The same pattern from the other events that I've mentioned. And they say sorry, and then to really, like, as you guard yourself, there is spirituality that will shield you. And this is very also Catholic Christian principles, right? And this is indigenous, no? So you may go to the next slide, Tito Ed, if you like to proceed.
Ito na
So
yung
this
iyong,
is like, this is
it's already your
so
response, yung when Kin also had to respond. Pero integrated, hindi simpleng ayuda or what, kundi kompleto, ano? Especially the one, hindi naman na maintindihan yung Bisaya niya, but I think the next one in English, yun na lang ipaliwanag mo because it's only a slide, but at least you can make the kwento examples niyan. Yung sinabi mong apat, no? There's health, there's food, there's livelihood, and the biggest, a care for nature and culture, no?
Yeah. So we call it the integrated COVID response because first, after the ritual was performed, so okay, there's food packs already from government. But by like texted, like the elders on the remote sitio, they don't get their share. And we're there to fill in the gap. Rather than them, wallow, they've been forgotten like that. We bridge, right? And thanks to Facebook, they're really friends. And April was my birthday month. I made a wish that we can do something for the COVID response. And we thought it was only just food packs. But health is our wealth because we promote the magnesium mineral spray. So it's not just alcohol, it's not just the the mask and all, but the minerals because it's also like very good for symptoms to be used. Livelihood support, we don't have much money, but how did you know that a little financial support would matter? We asked each one of the nanays and the youths, how did you fare? How did you cope? And then from there, there's like an offering, just a small amount, it's about 15,000. What can you do with this? And then the group say, can we have the cooking team do something? Can we have the flowers team do something? The arts team? And they divided like into 10 subgroups. So you have, so from that amount, no, it really from the 15,000 divided by 10, so 1.5 per group. Why? Because when we follow the cultural ways of Buliga, asayuda to inform, then Buliga, batun-batuna, you uplift, take care of each other. So when we visit community, so there's kalilaha, you respect them, you have to inform them, but they also be informed, then you have to help and then take care of each other and then uplift each other. So each community should not be seen as victims unable to do something, but in the cultural framework, when you empower them with this, there is a mutual exchange of giving. So when we try to give them like something like bigas, and Kim did not just follow the usual binibigay ng gobyerno because government gives all relatively 90% of the population. What we do is also provide salt, cooking oil, not just canned goods, noodles with biscuits, sugar, and then milk, especially for elders. So it's really also like, and sometimes eggs. And then my deputy asked, why are we bringing eggs? They only will get broken when we travel. And I said, because it's 14. But come to think of it, what we saw and learned and witnessed vividly is the sharing. So like we bring one big tank of cooking oil, everybody brings in their containers, or like something like a container, and everyone is divided. The bigas, everyone is divided, everyone is shared. So it's like, wow, I'm so amazed to see them, that the empathy among each other, and then they give priority for the elders, for the senior citizens. And then so it has nothing to do with ID or identification. No, and then they allow the kids or the youths to bring in the offering. And then we live in boxes of face masks, alcohol. Of course, we have to explain it to them. Like when outsiders visit you, you have to protect yourselves. and you are exposed to the mountain, you are farming, you are, in a very restrained way, but it's good also to follow the protocols of government so that, there's no violation on the part of the community, and especially your elders are also like IPMRs and leaders of the community. So we have to really like explain to them the way that it will not be like imposing on them, but really like there's culture, there's policy, so it has to be not conflicting. So that's one. That's how it goes. So we're glad we're able to do it. And then for those communities requesting to plant, because during the lockdown they can plant lawaan trees, so they requested for seedlings from the City of Valencia. And then we also give offerings for the ritualists para they can keep on praying in behalf of the tribes and for all of humanity. So we also need to support them.
Actually, isang question lang before we go to our last few minutes. Anong palagay mo ang maging attitude nila about vaccination?
Okay. Other leaders, they will not go for vaccination.
Yeah.
Not because they're afraid of it, but if you look at the loop of their lives, they don't go to hospitals.
Bagay.
They have their own system. They see nature elements, they see symbols, and with enough strong faith, they can make that choice. And the thing for our government is that I think there's no forceful imposition on vaccination. You just line up, register yourself, and we just have to make sure that we would have enough for for everyone, for a critical mass to be vaccinated. But for here with the ritualists and because for everything that has happened, for every disaster, they have the ritual as a strength, as a solidarity, as a common bond, and the way to show their faith. And if there's something not called to be doing, like they will go to a meeting, something might happen, they have omens. The omens are really like calls them like stop, don't go. So they also like rely on that. It may seem traditionalist to us, but the thing is, look at these are resilient people with the forest and all. In fact, those we want to be relieved from COVID should be running to the forest and just be there to feel safe. And they're in a safe space, and they have sun more than 15 minutes, and they have clean water and things like that. So it should be case to case.
Yeah.
And for those able to survive, maybe perhaps we need to write stories more about them in terms of resilience. Need to also understand their own defense immune system, and so it's not something like point blank not good. No, we don't say that. It has to be more with respect and more discernment. How come? And and who are they saying no?
Yeah. Well, that brings us to our last 3 minutes, Chai. And I already warned you, Chai, we will flash our title slide at the end because I want this last few minutes for you. Now, all of that, rami, and you already answered a few. But I knew you also want to just share your own reflection just to our listeners, with all these years, but especially these recent years, ang yaman-yaman, ang lalim-lalim na ng mga naunawaan mo at reflection mo. Ano ang gusto mong ipaabot ngayon so far sa karanasan mo, this long journey of learning with the wisdom keepers, sa atin, lalo sa mga lowlanders at outsiders tulad namin.
So, thank you, Tito Ed at Girlie for this chance to tell a story for an hour and a half. And yesterday, Dato Macapuco was here, was discussing about continued efforts for cultural profiling, where we are want to have a book reprinted. We're still wishing to do another episodes of cultural profiling. But from the sharing that I'm telling to everyone of us here, connecting to Facebook, is the idea that there's so much cultural traditions, in fact, deep sacred traditions that are still living traditions practiced by the tribes. And then how many of us in government, in CSOs, in church, in education, in the academe would really like back back out and create a space where they can make a stand as dignified people. And people also like Filipino, but they represent, they're not influenced by the colonial government. And many of the things that we impose on them is a product of a colonial government system and structure. We learned this critically from Datuvic in the early years that he formed KIN, that you have to make sure what you are mediating reinforces a colonial structure or surfaces what is indigenous. And perhaps it's a call for all of us to learn and unlearn as well, because if our cup of wisdom to understand indigenous reality is still not full, then perhaps we would be able to really, like, with dignity and respect, would say, please tell us what we need to learn as well from our ancient cultures. And perhaps in this manner, we can heal the deep discrimination and social exclusion. So that's one very important message. Second important message about the wars that are happening, the conflict between the rebels and the government, making amends, like make economic amelioration so that the rebels will, surrender and then there's no more war. It's not as easy as that. What is the elders trying to say is that how can you have development when land is bleeding? How can you plant a good seed when the land is not cleansed? That's why there's a space for indigenous rituals for cleansing, because cleansing is really very important to restore back, and where everyone responsible would really have to acknowledge their contribution to the destruction, their contribution to the divide, their contribution to the discrimination. So that needs to be healed in a very sacred ritual. And this has never been done for Mindanao, where I circulated and they say, help us to have the sacred of the land, sacred ritual of the land be performed. Third point is our mindset as a Filipino. We are learning so much from the outside world thanks to the social media, and there's only very few inputs on the indigenous and what is cultural and what is in our roots. As even me, like a Cebuana, I don't know so much of the Ludabi way of conversing. It's gone because everything is like we are just loaded with many things that we learn on social media. Let's go back, let's quiet down, and let's appreciate this generation that we have and the efforts of our ancestors and our predecessors to bring in to where we are now with honor. Despite the disaster, with a good practice, with gratitude, and from the spirituality being taught to the tribes, perhaps we can make a breakthrough to this pandemic and all other disasters happening in this world.
Wow! Maraming salamat. Na ang reaction nun ni Chai sa akin kanina kako last reply, kala ko ba, kuya Ed, ano ito? Conversation, gagawin mo yata ang reflection. But remember you started out saying, naghahanap ka, marami kang tanong kung sa buhay, sa meaning and all that. I really think that yung last ideas mo reflect yung mga katas ng natutunan. Ano sasabihin mo?
Yung mga volunteer ng KIN,
Nakikinig raw.
sina
Yes.
Kiki Dagapioso, sina Judith
Buanga.
Perez, sina Kenneth Del Rosario, si Mary Jane,
Si Antonio Ledesma.
oh, Kenneth Bryan, hello daw.
Sige.
They're all listening, young and not so senior.
And those who regret baka hindi
There's
nakahabol.
Christine Joy Agudo, thank you daw, Ma'am Chay. Oh.
So we're
mga bagong Ed Kev Latin, salamat.
kasama ni Sarah.
Salamat daw. Oo.
Sige, anyway, this po is recorded. So it can be replayed in any of those Facebook sites, and we can send you also a copy of the recording, China. So nag-request ako sa ating teki na bigyan tayo ng extra 3 minutes para hindi ka naman niraras. Ay tamang-tama.
Yes.
Believe ako sa timing mo.
Oo.
May sensing ka na talaga. No? Yung pakiramdam mo malalim kung kailan ka magbibigay ng message at tapos na. So, ito sa pagtatapos po natin ng ating Senior City Kwentuhan. Super maraming salamat. Napaka-generous, napaka-insightful ng kwento po at sharing ni Chai sa atin, hindi para sa sarili lang niya, pero higit sa lahat na maipaabot sa atin yung natutunan niya kasama sa ating mga katutubo, lalo na sa Mindanao at sa Bukidnon. And thinking na lang to next Saturday po na June 12, you always think of the nation, bansa. Sabi nga niya, yung concept ng nation, dominado ang concept ng taga Maynila, mga intellectual, mga kasama yan. Pero paano yung pinanggalingan ng ating mga indigenous communities? Yan ang pundasyon ng ating bansa.
Saan
Ano?
ba yung kulahi o pangatukan? Chay. Sabi ni Christine Joy.
Talaga.
Galing sa kulahi o pangantukan.
Okay. So, there will be a link. I'm sure naghahanap tayo ng mapag-usapan sa usapin ng pambansa, nation, Pilipinas. Huwag nating kalimutan at higit sa lahat, kilalanin ang kahalagahan ng ating mga katutubong komunidad at mga leader at karunungan. Kasi kung wala yan, yung usapin mo, kumokopya ka lang sa framework ng iba. Huli ka na nga. Pero ito, may panggagalingan tayong original, atin, likas.
Ang pinakamahalaga dyan, seryosohin natin ang mga omen at sensing. Kasi alam mo
Mabigat.
naman yung mga tao, ay, hindi yan totoo, hindi yan totoo. Hala, yan na nga.
So muli, thank you. Maraming
Maraming
salamat,
salamat.
Chai, for being our
May
guest.
power tayo at saka internet.
Biro mo, at least pinagbigyan tayo. Salamat rin, Globe at Buseco, na hindi nyo kami interrupted ng sobra. Maraming salamat. Chai, sa ulitin, ha? Ano?
Yeah.
O, naghahanap po kami sinong magbibigay ng suporta para makapag-publish pa tayo ng ibang kopya at mag-benefit yung iba. Maraming salamat. Okay,
Thank you.
keep safe ngayon. Keep safe, keep well.
Thank you, Girlie. Yeah. Good. Thank you so much.
Ay, nako, sa amin ang maraming pasasalamat, Chay. Maraming salamat po sa ating mga tagapilig. Hanggang susunod na Sabado, muli po, alas 3 hanggang alas 4:30. This is Senior City Kwentuhan, signing off and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Maraming salamat. Bye-bye!